If you're doing everything you can to keep your car on the road, holding it together with like duct tape and string, well, Cassie Struick, she feels you because her 2011 Jeep Wrangler,
it's getting older and it's up there in kilometers, and there's just certain things that are starting to go. I've had to do repairs every year for the last probably 5 or 6 years on that thing. And this year was a big one. I had to get my clutch fixed. I still have to do my tire rod ends. I need an alignment.
She's dumping all that money into her Jeep because, well, have you seen the price of a new car? Hi, I'm Paul Haberstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. So, your car needs a new transmission. Do you spend the $5,000, then pay to fix the suspension next year, the head gaskets after that? That could feel like throwing good money after bad. But when the alternative is spending $60,000 on a new car, well, more Canadians are now thinking, hey, why not try to get a few more clicks out of the old ride? Also on The Cost of Living today, it's the cost of living. We're digging into inflation. The official numbers say it's going down, but if it doesn't feel like that to you, you're probably not wrong. Inflation is much more personal than the consumer price index might suggest. We'll look at why and what that could mean for all of us. So Leah Hendry, let's talk inflation. When you hear someone say inflation is cooling or inflation is down, does that ring true to you?
Yeah, no. Every time I walk into the grocery store, it just seems like prices are up from the last time I was there. And it's not just food, a cup of coffee, rent.
And yet, inflation is down to 2.2%. Now, you compare that to when it was at its peak, summer 2022, prices were ripping higher. Inflation then was more like 8%.
So it feels like good news, but it may not feel that way to everybody.
No, because the consumer price index, the CPI, that's the inflation number, it is an average. That means some people are going to be higher than the average, some people are going to be lower. And inflation really for most of us is kind of bespoke. We all have our own rates, and that rate depends on what you buy, where you live, whether you own or rent.
But there is a way to find out what your actual rate of inflation is. You can use the personal inflation calculator, and you can actually find that on StatsCan's website. And it lets you compare your spending to the CPI. So if you just give me a second, I'll just pull it up here.
All right, real-time action on the radio. Let's go.
You just punch in what you spend in a month. So there are almost 30 different categories there. So groceries, cell phone, mortgage, rent. Then you put in your annual costs, like car insurance. The calculator will spit out a number.
And
that number, for most people, probably isn't the official inflation rate, 2.2%. I asked two people with different lives to try out the calculator, Sarah Boyer and Richard Lee.
Okay, well, tell us about Sarah.
She's 25 years old. She lives just outside Montreal with her partner and their toddler. They're renters. And that's where inflation is really getting them. 2 years ago, they were paying $800 a month for their apartment. And then they had to move out and find a new place. Now, they're paying more than $1,500 a month.
So their rent nearly doubled.
Yeah. And that was a huge jump for her. According to the CMHC, the average rent for a 2-bedroom in this country has gone up by more than 20% since the pandemic. And then, of course, there's the cost of food. And Sarah is feeling that. She's got a toddler. He's only 2, but
he eats like a teenager. He just never stops. It's like an endless void. Just the little snacks to pick up. I try to feed him healthy. And when I do feed him things like Kraft Dinner or, sidekicks that used to come on sale at 99 cents a box are now at the very cheapest, like $2.
If you have a toddler that eats like a teenager and grocery prices have gone up like 30% in the last 5 years, that's a hit.
It is. And then there's the price of gas. Both Sarah and her partner have cars. He drives to work and she uses her car for errands and daycare pickups. And they live in Quebec, where it's more expensive to fill up than in some other parts of the country.
Well, what kind of difference are we talking about?
Well, compared to Ontario, 15 to 20 cents a litre more. So they'll sometimes drive across the border to fill up. And even with a combined household income of more than $100,000, Sarah says she has to watch her spending.
I am very careful. I don't go out. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I'm so careful with my money. And I still feel like sometimes I'm living paycheck to paycheck.
Well, you got Sarah to do StatsCan's inflation calculator. What was her number?
4.8%.
Okay, so that's like more than double the official number. So when she hears the Bank of Canada or StatsCan or, I don't know, someone like me talk about inflation cooling off or going down, do you have any sense of how she feels about that?
Oh, yeah. I asked her exactly that.
It makes me feel like as a voter and as a consumer, like I'm not being heard necessarily. And to have the government tell us that, well, no, prices are starting to come down. No one feels it. Like I'm not the only one who goes to the grocery store, and when I buy 5 things, it ends up costing me $50. And I just look around like, oh my God, what did I just buy?
A lot of people, I think, feel that way, right? It's like, holy smokes, I got nothing in my cart. What about the other person you talked to?
Richard Lee. So he's 52 and he lives in London, Ontario with his wife Tanya and their 2 kids. They both have really good jobs. Combined, they make about $400,000 a year.
All right. Tidy little income bracket?
Yeah, I mean, their household income is a lot more than Sarah's, and their inflation rate is different too. Unlike Sarah, Richard owns his home. He bought it nearly a decade ago before prices really went up, when the average price of a home in London was around $335,000.
Ultimately, we're saving money, I think, owning a house.
Okay, well, a big part of inflation is shelter costs, and Richard doesn't sound like he's really feeling that.
No, his mortgage payment only eats up about 15% of their monthly salary.
Well, that's probably about like half of where Sarah's at. I would bet she's around like 30% more.
Yeah, around there. And, Richard and his wife, they mostly work from home, so the price of gas isn't as much of a factor. But that doesn't mean they aren't feeling inflation at all. When they shop, they've noticed that the prices are creeping up. And where they're feeling it is more in the nice-to-have category, in their recreation budget. And Richard says he's seen the cost of travel go way up, like for an all-inclusive resort package.
Punta Cana, or the going away to an all-inclusive, it used to be like 6, 7, 8. Now I think the cheapest one that we can find is 10. But, whenever we're there, we always, Tanya likes the Diamond Club, so we always upcharge that, which is like another 20%. And it's nice, but another 20%.
So traveling is more expensive for them. Prices have gone up. Leah, do you know how Richard is feeling about inflation just overall?
Yeah, he says it isn't something he's really worried about.
I think from a daily standpoint, it doesn't really impact us. We don't really think about it.
Okay, and you got Richard to use the inflation calculator as well. What was his number?
Some months it was less than 0.5%.
Okay, so like way less than the official rate and way, way, way less than what Sarah's feeling, because she's at like nearly 5%.
Yeah, I mean, even he was surprised.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. Well, thanks, Leah.
Thanks.
So Richard and Sarah don't really live that far apart. But when it comes to inflation, it's like they're in different worlds. She's frustrated. He's okay. I asked Mark Blyth about this gap and its potential consequences. He's an economist at Brown University and just wrote a new book, Inflation, a guide for users and losers.
When you talk about inflation and the index that measures inflation, what you're talking about is consumption goods, the things that we consume. And are those things becoming more expensive, or are they basically staying the same, or are they going down in price? And if you're at the bottom end of the income distribution, let's say you're bottom 20%, you're a single mom, you've got a kid. If prices for basic things that you consume, which is almost 90% of what you spend your paycheck on, go up by 10%, that's a serious crisis.
If you're living paycheck to paycheck, most of what you make goes to 3 things: food, shelter, and transportation. When those costs go up, like you said, any financial wiggle room disappears fast. Now, if you make more money, you own your house, maybe the mortgage is paid off, inflation to you.
I like to call this the problem of the people who shop at Whole Foods, which is basically you've been overpaying by 30% for your groceries for the past 10 years. You wouldn't notice if it went up another 10%. And also, the portion of your income that you spend on consumption goods is much, much smaller because your income's so much bigger. By the time you get to the top 1%, it's literally nothing. It is a fraction of what you earn.
So some people don't pay any attention to inflation. It barely registers. For others, it registers constantly. But even though we experience inflation differently, that's not how we hear about it.
Statistics Canada this morning shows Canada's inflation rate cooled slightly in October. Statistics Canada says cheaper gas prices and groceries helped bring the numbers down. Gas prices.
Hearing that inflation is down when, in your life, it's still running hot, that can be a problem.
If someone like me is mansplaining to you that, no, it's really 2% and everything's going back to trend, and all you see is walking at the grocery store and things are more expensive than they were and it's harder for you on stagnant wages to make things meet, then why would you believe people like me?
He says more people aren't believing experts or official numbers and explanations. They're tuning out and finding information from other places, even if it's not great information.
But if you lose your faith in the kind of the mainstream explanation because it just doesn't seem to take into account how you experience your life or practically everyone that you know, then that's a problem for governance. We have not got this right. We have not paid attention to this.
And the consequences of not getting this right, big picture for society, Mark Blyth says they're not great.
If we consistently ignore the fact that we have very, very large income and wealth disparities, and that phenomena such as inflation really impact different parts of our citizenry in different ways, don't expect that citizenry to hold together.
He says inflation is one more thing straining the ties that bind. It's tearing at the social fabric that makes us feel like we're all in this together. And as the gaps between us get wider, what does that look like?
It looks exactly like polarization. It looks like fractionalization. It looks like basically Alberta taking off on its own. It looks like the Maritimes being pissed off at everyone else, right? It's about society as a whole, not recognizing that it is society as a whole, because we don't see ourselves as one community anymore. We see ourselves as people at the top who've got all the things, and basically the game is rigged, and everybody at the bottom's running harder and harder to stay in the same place, and it never seems to get any easier.
Mark calls inflation a hugely powerful force. He says governments need to do a better job recognizing just how powerful. And if they don't,
it manifests itself in multiple different ways in different countries. It could be eat the rich in one place. It could be punish the poor in another. It could be nasty to immigrants. They could be the ones you want to blame for this instead. So there's lots of different ways that this can come out. But the fact that it's there as a motivation, that's something that we surely should be paying attention to.
Inflation isn't the only thing driving big global trends like polarization and political populism. But he says it's not a coincidence they've risen along with inflation. For countries like Canada, until relatively recently, inflation hasn't been much of an issue. We've had a pretty smooth ride since the early 90s. We got used to prices being under control.
We got really lucky for about 30 years. We had the rise of the supply chain revolution. We had the rise of the container ship as a global instrument. We got global supply chains. We got 500 million Chinese workers joining the global labor supply. We went through 30 years of intense deflation.
Those factors that held costs down, they're being replaced by things that could send prices higher. Walls are going up between countries. There's more trade protectionism. That's all inflationary. Mark says it means we need to get our approach to inflation right, whether that's how we talk about it, recognizing that we all feel it differently, or figuring out how to help the people hit the hardest. And he warns that if we don't,
then it ends up in a really, really bad place, because then the people who will take up that mantle will be the most aggressive, will be the most bombastic, and will be the ones that will use violence. It's that simple. We can't fail this task.
So how do we get this right? Well, Mark has some ideas.
Here's a really simple thing we could do. Build an absolute ton of housing. If you do that, you take the pressure off huge numbers of people. And if you do that, you could also rebuild all the skills institutions you let atrophy. Because if you do that, you need HVAC, you need electrical engineers, sparkies, plumbers, people who could also help with decarbonisation, installing solar, installing heat pumps. right? Once you've got that, you've got those skills back up, you've got skills plus housing, you can do labor mobility. You can allow people to move around and move away from towns where their houses are underwater and there are no jobs. Right? It's not that difficult to do this stuff. It's just difficult to actually think that you need to do it.
We've gone entire generations without having to worry about inflation. So changing how we think about it is a big shift. But Mark says it's also necessary. This is a time of serious upheaval for the world. Inflation is just one risk we're facing. But also,
I hate to sound cliched, but it's also a period of opportunity because things have become unstuck. We can be creative. We can actually try things and try and get things to work. This is just one part of it, but it's an important part because if you understand how this affects people very differently, then that gives us a key into the type of things that we should be seeing if we want to basically do something positive.
So hey, we're all for doing something positive, but also it would help if whatever that positive thing is could maybe, be on sale. Because, stuff's expensive. On your Radio MBI podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershrud. So Daniel Nerman, I know when it comes to cars, you and we kind of share the same philosophy.
We sure do, because we both drive really old cars. I've got a 2009 Toyota Yaris, and it's still going strong.
And I am not competitive. This is not a competition, but, I drive an 04 Subaru, so your Yaris is, it's kind of a pup.
Okay, now I feel like you're bragging, and I don't like it.
I will stop. And in fairness, I have had to put a chunk of change into my car over the years. Like just last year, I had a coolant leak, thought it was a radiator. It wasn't. Yada, yada, yada. $8,000 later, new engine.
But you spent that money.
I did.
And you're not alone, because more people are finding ways to keep their old cars on the road. According to the Automotive Industries Association, the average age of a vehicle in Canada is 10 and a half years old. If you go back a couple of decades, it was less than 9.
That's a big jump.
Peter Sully sees it every day in his garage. He owns McDonald's Automotive in Windsor.
The average car that comes in here is probably 8 to 9 years old. And the cars we fix are 8 years to probably 20 years.
And the reason for that is actually kind of good news. Cars today last longer. They're made with galvanized steel, so they don't rust out like they used to. And Peter says overall, car technology is just better.
They hold together longer than they used to. Before 100,000 miles, 180K, they kind of be ready for the scrapyard, but now cars are lasting 300,000 and 400,000 kilometers.
All right, my plucky little Subaru might have a lot of life left.
You better hope, because right now, the average listing price for a new car in Canada on AutoTrader is $63,000. That is a 40% increase in the last 5 years.
That is so much higher.
It's so much. And that's why Cassie Struick keeps fixing her 2011 Jeep Wrangler. It has 255,000 clicks on it.
I've thought about replacing my car for at least 5 years now. But every time I do the math on that, it doesn't make sense to get a new vehicle. It really doesn't.
And Cassie, she works in IT, so she makes a pretty good salary. But
to be paying $400 to $600 extra a month, that's a steep price. And the cost of living today, just trying to be able to save up to buy a home and to have savings in general, keep my investments going, to buy a new car would really put a huge hindrance in that.
Well, it would, but at the same time, there is a trade-off if you're going to drive an older vehicle.
Right, because you're going to have to spend more money on maintenance and repairs. And even though her car is well made, it is almost 15 years old.
There's just certain things that are starting to go. I've had to do repairs every year for the last probably 5 or 6 years on that thing. And this year was a big one. I had to get my clutch fixed. I still have to do my tie rod ends. I need an alignment.
I did my tie rod ends and my clutch.
A recent study from JD Power says visits to Canadian dealerships and repair shops are on the rise, so you're not alone. Peter Solly in Windsor, he told me that in the last few years, his business has tripled. You know, he used to see maybe 10 to 15 cars come through his shop a day. Now it's more like 30 or 40.
Like this morning, the parking lot was just, you couldn't even really walk through it. It was just cars everywhere, like a tomato patch.
I reached out to garages in Alberta, Manitoba, and Ontario. Everyone told me they're run off their feet. Business is good, but it also means some customers are waiting longer for appointments. Like when Cassie Struick had to get her clutch replaced this summer, she couldn't get in for 6 weeks. But the wait times aren't just because more people are getting their cars fixed. Some repairs are taking longer because shops are waiting on parts. You know, supply chain disruptions, they're still a problem in the auto industry.
Yeah, but this is kind of an old story, right? We've been talking about this for, 4 or 5 years? Those haven't cleared up yet for cars?
Not completely. One mechanic told me the other thing, too, is if you have a vehicle with a lot of tech, but it's not like new, you know, it's 7 or 8 years old, some parts may now be obsolete. So tracking down what you need could take longer. Jessica Rosinski is with Mitch Insurance Brokers in Ontario. She's seeing longer delays for repairs and parts, even things like windshield wiper motors. Like she told me about one of her clients.
We were 6 months in on them driving a rental in this claim, all because of this silly little part that, you know, makes the washer fluid squirt out on your windshield. 6 months.
6 months in a rental. That's costing someone.
It is. It's costing the insurance companies. And Jessica says eventually that trickles down to drivers through higher premiums.
So for a lot of this stuff we're talking about, we keep waiting for it to clear up, whether it's supply chain disruptions or mechanics being really busy. At some point, are things going to go back to normal?
This might be the new normal. There are 7,500 vacancies for auto technicians right now in Canada. Jeff Compton lives in Kingston, Ontario, and hosts a podcast called The Jaded Mechanic. He says everyone in the industry is worried about the same thing. There's just not enough young people getting into the trade.
The average age of the technician right now is 48 years old, so 2 years younger than me. Just to put in perspective, the coworker that I work with, the other technician, he's 59. So you have two technicians working in a shop that are 50 and 59. We are not as fast as we used to be.
Jeff says that's another reason you could be waiting longer to get your car fixed. Mechanics are getting older, and many shops are short-staffed.
Well, yeah, people getting into the trades, not enough people in the trades. This is a big issue in this country.
And everyone is competing for new talent. Some dealerships are advertising $5,000 to $10,000 signing bonuses and six-figure salaries.
Well, that is one way to get people to come work for you.
Sure, but maybe not so great for customers because as the cost of labor goes up,
the cost of repairs now is up. What we call door rates or shop rates, labor rates at a shop, has now gone up, $50 in the last 5 years on average. So what used to cost you $100 an hour for your technician to look at a customer's car is now up to $150.
Yeah, if I think about my repair bills, my many repair bills, I mean, that rings pretty true.
And Jeff says the only way that will change is like if a couple thousand mechanics drop from the sky tomorrow, or if the demand for car repairs goes down because more of us start buying new.
Is that likely to happen, especially with prices, being as high as they are?
I talked to Greg Layson about this. He's the digital editor of Automotive News Canada. He says prices are coming down a little, but not enough. Manufacturers, they're just not making as many small, affordable vehicles as they used to. Like, think about those compact starter cars we all grew up with, the Ford Fiesta, the Honda Fit. They don't make them anymore.
Entry-level vehicles now are essentially baby versions of the full size. So, you might have a Navigator and an Expedition and then an Explorer and then an Escape. You just continue to go down the size, and so you get smaller versions of the bigger versions.
Yeah, people like driving big cars, and automakers are going to go where the demand is.
But a lot of those baby SUVs start at like $30,000. Jeff says this is why leasing cars is on the rise again. Canadians are opting to essentially rent rather than buy.
0% financing is back in a big way on a lot of vehicles. So if you're budgeting based on a monthly payment, which the vast majority of Canadians do. They buy their vehicles based on monthly payment. And so if you lease, you can get the monthly payment down.
And when you lease, you're not lining up at the repair shop as often because you're in a newer car.
Right, well, that's one way to go. Or, like me, you could just keep fixing your old car.
You and Cassie Struick. She says she's going to drive that old Jeep right to the ground.
I've got a vehicle that's fabulous and reliable, and if I can keep fixing it and keep running it, I'm going to.
I bet you she's going to make it to 400,000 clicks.
Well, I'm clearly pulling for Cassie. Thanks, Danielle.
You're welcome.
That's all for the show. Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Leah Hendry, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. And if you hear something on the show, want to give us a call, please do. Or if you have a question about anything related to business or economics, let us know what it is. Every so often we do a Q&A show. We try to answer your questions. So drop us a line, let us know, costofliving@cbc.ca, or give us a call, 1-866-550-COST. That's 1-866-550-2678. We love hearing from you. We love your questions. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Thanks for listening.